Hello, BookTube. It was like most of the Northern Hemisphere. I'm sitting here sweating like a corrupt detective, but I thought I'd record a video. It's been 2 weeks and my 2 subscribers, very excited about it. I'm sure you've all been waiting for another video, but yeah. So the last two ones have been kind of book reviews, so I'm going to try something different. This one is a bit of Admission of Guilt. It is the Dune on the Range that kind of got away from me, or didn't quite happen. I have kind of stack of books here. I'll talk through. This is the thumbnail people like to see. So these are books that I kind of started reading for Dune on the Range and just never actually got to finish it, or in some cases never even got to start it. So while I did enjoy the Elmer Leonard books, I ended up reading other things, and there were other kind of more pressing things I had to concentrate on rather than reading westerns. So hopefully next year I'll give it a bit more of a go, or at any point during the year I just decide to read a western, I'll do it. Okay, so the first one I was hoping to read, or at least make a dent into, was a non-fiction book, Son of the Morning Star. So that is a non-fiction work about General Armstrong Custer. And I suppose, like Custer, I may have bitten off more than I could chew. It was a little late coming in from the library, so I didn't get much of a chance to read through it or even kind of glance through it. But it came highly regarded online, so, you know, if anyone here has actually read this book, you know, you might say, hey, crack into it before you give it back to the library, or, you know, if you've read it and thought, you know, there wasn't much going on here, I could just return it to the library, or I could take it out again or renew it. That's the great thing about libraries. Another book that I gave a bit more attention to was a contemporary western, or probably a more contemporary western than what I had been reading. So this is a book about I think it came out 2013 and it was nominated, 2011, nominated or shortlisted for the 2011 Man Booker Prize. So highly regarded when it came out. I didn't quite get what all the fuss was about. I made it about 2/3 of the way through it, and hopefully I will get a chance to finish it. But I just couldn't get the love of it. So the conceit of the book is that there are two brothers with the surname Sisters, hence why it's called The Sisters Brothers, which is an awkward title to say. But they are essentially bounty hunters working for a very mysterious and not all that good person. They're out to find a prospector on the west coast, and to exact the revenge of their kind of mob boss. And on the way, there's a whole host of kind of quirky characters and incidents and kind of episodes that they come across, and they just didn't quite hit for me. Which was a shame. I felt there was something there. You know, the idea is pretty good, kind of a surreal trip through the Wild West, but it wasn't surreal. It wasn't even cartoonish. If it had been cartoonish, it would have been something, but it was just not quite landing. It was more like a series of sketches, and the main brother, Eli, who's the book is from his point of view, is on one hand presented as an almost kind of pathetic character, or, you know, maybe the author was trying to go for a bit more of a sympathetic person, but he's still a hired gun. He still kills people. He's still quite ruthless when he needs to be, but he kind of feels bad about it sometimes. It's, yeah, I couldn't get the couldn't get the love. But yeah, I will finish it off. You know, there was enough of a story to get through there, but it hasn't been a great reading year for me, and this book certainly didn't help. But yeah, again, if you've seen it and had a different opinion, clearly other people have regarded it quite well. But yeah, didn't do it for me. So like, to read out the blurb, you know, it is 1851, and a lust for gold has swept the American frontier. Two brothers, the notorious Eli and Charlie sisters, are on the road to California following a trail of an elusive prospector, Herman Kermit Warm. On this odyssey, Eli and his brother cross paths with a remarkable cast of characters, losers, cheaters, and ne'er-do-wells from all stripes of life, and Eli begins to question what he does for a living and whom he does it for. But it kind of starts questioning on page 1, so that, you know, that's not really giving much away, but I suppose what he does with that. Maybe it all turns around in the final third. We'll see. I might be able to give you a more fulsome review of that one. The third book that I got from the library, kind of vaguely on the theme of June on the Range, and I suppose the theme goes as far as maybe the title sounds like the name of Western. It's The Man Who Went into the West. There you go. It's a biography of the poet R.S. Thomas. And there he is. That's about as cheerful as he's ever looked in any of the photographs you can see of him online. He was an Anglican priest in Wales. He served kind of pretty poor and destitute parishes particularly in North Wales. So a lot of them would have been Welsh speakers. So people who aren't maybe familiar with Wales, Wales is a principality that's kind of attached onto England. It's part of the UK. It has very much its own identity, very strong language, and kind of sense of self. Particularly in North Wales, the people would have a less strong stereotypical Welsh accent in English, but there are more fluent Welsh speakers, and Welsh itself is a language that's thriving, which is wonderful to see. And R.S. Thomas was definitely a proponent of that Welsh identity. Though he's a pretty grim figure. I think he used to give sermons against the use of washing machines, and would live in rundown cottages and garrets. Now, I haven't made much of a crack at this book, but I have skimmed through it, and I had previously read a year or two ago, but yeah, 2 years ago at this point, read some of his, read a book of his poetry and some other poems of his, and I quite like them. He's an interesting character, very much against the modern world. You know, as you can see, he's not a man for TikTok. I always really dislike when people discuss it like a famous author or a figure in history and go, oh, he would have been all over Twitter, or X as it is now, or he would have been a social media whiz. It's like, no. Not at any point. I think the typewriter may have been too much for R.S. Thomas. I don't know. I haven't read the book, but I have skimmed through it, and it's quite an interesting biography, because as he goes through his life, they do include quite a lot of his poetry, which is great. Sometimes you come across these biographies, and you know, not that I read a huge amount of biographies of poets, but a few of them you wouldn't know that they ever wrote a poem. I suppose that has to do with licensing and all that. Even the book contains a map, and hence the title, The Lifelong Journey into the West. So starting there in Anglesey, that's North Wales, there's the Irish Sea, and it's kind of journeyed through North Wales, finally ending up, again, very remote area. And that's how the book is structured. So kind of to give you a sense of his poems, there's quite a lot to choose from. Yes, so Here's one from his time in Sarn, and the author Byron Rogers is very, very, very conversational style of writing. So when he's talking about this part of his life, he says, "Read out this poem. The loneliness it conveys seems unbearable, and the terror in it. The poem is called Balance, though a more accurate title would have been Vertigo. After you have read it, think what its effect transposed to a sermon would have been on the 6 or 8 people listening in the pews beneath him." Now that's a very evocative way of kind of introducing a poem. It's just enough to have you interested in kind of what he's going to say. Sorry, I stumbled there. Weird notification came up on my phone about how much time was left. But after that, I should read it. No piracy, but there is a plank to walk over 70,000 fathoms, as Kierkegaard would say, and far out from the land. I have abandoned my theories, the easier certainties of belief. There are no handrails to grasp. I stand, and on either side there is the haggard gallery of the dead, those who in their day walked here and fell. Above and beyond there is the galaxy's violence and the meaningless wastage of force. The chaos the blonde hero's leap over my head brings him nearer to. Is there a place here for the spirit? Is there time on this brief platform for anything other than the mind's failure to explain itself? Quite a serious person. There are some other. I know I'm kind of going backwards. This one I thought was quite interesting because it's him as a translator. So there is a traditional Welsh folk verse called the Walls of Carnarvon. So Carnarvon, very historic place in Wales. And this is a literal translation. One rain-swept eventide I went a-walking on the shores of Menai in the silent meditation. Loud was the wind and wild was the white billow, and the sea was hurling over the walls of Carnarvon. But on the morrow morn I went a-walking on the shores of Menai, and the stillness was on them. Silent was the wind, and kindly was the sea, and the sun was shining on the walls of Carnarvon. So that's the literal translation. What did Mr. Smiley, R.S. Thomas, what did he make of it? One night of tempest I arose and went along the Menai shore on dreaming bent. The wind was strong and savage swung the tide, and the waves blustered on Carnarvon's side. But in the morrow, when I passed that way, on Menai's shore the hush of heaven lay. The wind was gentle and the sea a flower, and the sun slumbered on Carnarvon's tower. I think he knew what he was doing. That's some serious poetry there. But he wasn't always so grim and hard. I think he was grim and hard for most of his life. Although weirdly on the back, I noticed that it had said. So to give you an idea what the blurb says, one of the greatest British poets of the 20th century. I'm sure he would have preferred Welsh, but we'll see. R.S. Thomas was a Welsh vicar in a succession of remote country parishes in Wales, who made his name with bleak and beautiful portraits of his rural community. Later he addressed genuinely metaphysical poems to the God he found dauntingly absent, and by the end of his life was writing some of the finest love poetry in memory of his late wife. Many considered him most ascetic, antisocial, wintry man they had ever known, but a BBC arts correspondent counted him along with Lenny Bruce and Ken Dodd, one of the only 3 genuinely funny men he'd met. I can't believe that's true at all. Lenny Bruce was a quite a provocative comedian from I think like the 60s or 70s in the US. I think he does like a list of banned words, swear words that he was part of his act. Ken Dodd is a famous English comedian. He's passed now, but he was like the last of the music hall acts. Very hard-working comedian. I remember reading a book by Darrow Brian, who's an Irish comedian who operates mainly in the UK, and he said wherever he went there was always a Ken Dodd performance, and at one point he said, well, I have to see him. And he said that the set would last for like 3 hours, or maybe that was an exaggeration, but it was an extremely long time to be on stage, and the humour was very much music hall comedy. I don't know much about it, but Lenny Bruce, Ken Dodd and R.S. Thomas would make for some kind of dinner party anyway, or very, very, very long car ride, or maybe a very short one. But yeah, the grimness has come through, and I think the previous 2 poems we looked at. But in his early life, he was quite romantic, and I came across this particular poem he wrote. They're very different from the other ones, and I think it's worth sharing. I never thought in this poor world to find another who had loved the things I love, the wind, the trees, the cloud-swept sky above. One who was beautiful and grave and kind, who struck no discord in my dreaming mind, content to live with silence as a cloak, about her every thought, or, if she spoke, her gentle voice was music on the wind. And then about the ending of a day, in early spring, when the soft western breezes had chased the melancholy clouds afar, as up a little hill I took my way, I found you all alone upon your knees, your face uplifted to the evening star. Again, very different. And even the way it changes from, describing this person to suddenly them being, I found you. It's very immediate, very personal, very different from the other 2 poems. But yeah, even though I've only scanned this book, I think it'd definitely be one I read. I know it used to be like 99 cents on Amazon for a period in 2022, and I've always kicked myself that I never bought it. But yeah, I mean, you can get it from the library. It's great. Anyway, so yeah, thanks for bearing with me and my attempt at June on the Range. We'll see. Definitely finish off this one. I think we know what I'm going to do with this one, and I think this was kind of an also ran if anyone follows horses or horse racing. But yeah, thank you BookTube, and hopefully I have another video soon. Bye.